Here is another helpful video for those of you who are not interested in wasting any more lumber than necessary when building a deck. And in this video, I'm going to provide you with 3 examples of how you can build a deck without any wasted lumber and without cutting one single board. And by the time you're done watching the video, you're going to realize that you can apply this method to a variety of different decks that can be built in 2-foot increments. For example, an 8-foot by 8-foot deck, or even a 10-foot by 12-foot deck, or a 12-foot by 16-foot deck. However, you're going to have to break out the saw if you're going to build your decks in 1-foot increments. So let's go ahead and take a look at the deck here. We're going to be using bridging here. However, you won't need to use bridging if you want to break the saw out and cut some blocks. However, if you do that, then it's going to defeat the purpose of this video. And don't worry about doing that. If it's going to be easier for you to use blocks than the bridging, then I say go for it. But I'm using the bridging because I'm providing you with a deck that can be built without any cuts. And of course, the bridging is going to be installed from the bottom and the top. And you will need to purchase the correct bridging, which might require you to purchase a certain size joist. Again, something you will need to think about during the design phase. And for this project to work, the decking and these beams will need to be the same size. However, if I want to change the length of the deck, then I can do that by installing different sized joist. For example, maybe 8 10-footers or 14 or 16-footers to provide us with our 12-foot by 12-foot 2 1/8 inches. And you're probably wondering, how did we end up with this measurement here? And that's because we lined our first decking board up with the edge of the joist, and then we left an 1/8 of an inch gap in between each one of the decking boards, only to find out that when we got over to here that this last board is going to be sticking out a little further. So to fix this, all we need to do is nail another board, maybe a 2x4, onto the end of the joist, or a piece of decking like I have here, depending upon what lumber prices are at the time of when you're building your deck. Or if you want to break out your saw, you can rip this last decking board. I will leave that up to you. And that's why we get a 12-foot by 12-foot 2 1/8 inch deck this way. Now for our second example, I'm going to reduce the length of the deck. And again, this isn't going to be difficult to do. I'm going to use 8-foot long joist. And to provide you with another example, I'm going to run the bracing down the center, because this might provide us with enough structural support to prevent the joist from leaning and save you a few dollars on your project. Now in this example, I'm not going to have the same problem with the decking. If I start at the front and then have an 1/8 of an inch gap in between each one of the decking boards, I'm going to end up with a situation like this where the joist is going to be a little bit longer than the decking. However, if you don't like that, I'll provide you with an example of how you can fix that also. Again, without using a saw to cut any lumber. And since we are a 1/2 inch short, we're going to end up with a shorter deck. Instead of our 8-foot by 12-foot, we're going to be a 1/2 inch short. And in our last example, we are going to have a longer deck, which again is just going to require us to have longer support beams and possibly another concrete footing in the center if the span of our beam isn't going to work. However, we could always increase the size of the beam to eliminate the footings, and that's going to be something to consider when you're designing the project. Now in this one here, I also moved the bridging closer to the end to provide you with another example of how that can be done. And it wouldn't be a bad idea to install the bridging near the ends, except if you have a situation where you have a span greater than 10 feet, then you will also need to run another row down the middle. And of course, you can see here where the 16-foot decking is going to match with the 16-foot long beams. And then I'm going to go ahead and space the decking a 32nd of an inch wider on each joint so that I can get rid of the 1/2 inch gap that I had here. And even though I'm suggesting this, I'm not saying that you can do it. especially if you are using lumber that might not be completely dry yet and is going to shrink and leave you with a 1/4 of an inch or a 3/8 of an inch gap that could create a safety problem. And as always, check with your local building authorities to verify the information and all of the videos you watch on YouTube. And of course, now you have another tool for your construction toolbox. And I would suggest to put a little thought into your design and the building process to maximize the square footage and reduce the amount of waste for your next deck building project.